Hello and welcome. The character conflict in episode 9 was good for not necessarily obvious reasons. Ty and Matt have good chemistry and play off each other well, but for subtle reasons. They also conflict and fight a lot for not necessarily obvious reasons. This episode, on the other hand, takes the opposite approach. The first minute or so of this episode shows Izzy and Mimi crash landing on their beds. This establishes that the episode is going to be about the two of them. Now, Izzy and Mimi have no chemistry, at least not in the traditional sense of the word, and they don't really play off each other well. However, they are very much polar opposites, and that's where this episode's conflict is going to draw from. Anyone who watches just a couple episodes of this show should immediately pick up on the fact that Mimi and Izzy are polar opposites. Izzy is best known for his intelligence, Mimi is best known for her airheadedness. Izzy is mature and logical, Mimi is immature and a slave to her emotions. Izzy is obsessed with internal things, Mimi is obsessed with external things. So you stick them in an episode and you've got conflict. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having an odd couple-like episode, but I will say it's not as interesting as what they did in, say, the previous one. So early in the episode, Izzy and Tentomon come across a temple of some kind and enter it. Unfortunately, most of the early parts of this episode are focused on Mimi and her Valley Girl dialogue. Do you have any lip gloss? I left my lip gloss in a thing. But my lip gloss! You know what I'm talking about. We put up with that for a couple of minutes when Sukamon and Chumon show up. They're basically a pair of ugly little goofballs, and I don't know how else to characterize them. They want Mimi's hat and handbag and eventually try and steal them. They make a grab for the bag, but the Digivice glows on them and suddenly they start acting nice. So I guess they were possessed by Devimon's evil, but they don't act anything like any of the other possessed Digimon did, so I'm not sure. And if Devimon did possess these two guys, I don't think he'd want them to try and steal Mimi's handbag. But whatever, moving on. Sukamon and Chumon start leading Mimi and Palmon somewhere, I think, but then they get separated because Mimi and Palmon jump to another hunk of island. Which is very much to Mimi's relief because Sukamon and Chumon had started to aggressively hit on her. We're 10 episodes in and this has now happened twice, not counting the time when TK tried to play matchmaker with her and Matt in episode 2. Once again, for the love of God, she's 10. Izzy becomes very interested in the temple and starts exploring it. This while Tentomon is urging him to stop it and go search for his friends. So once again, we're seeing how Izzy's mind works. His curiosity about how this whole digital world works is overriding his interest in other people. And let me just say, I can totally relate to that thought process. Anyway, Mimi and Palmon come across the temple that Sukamon and Chumon were leading them toward and enter it. Everyone is thrilled to finally meet up with somebody else, except for Izzy, who could care less. He's found some hieroglyphs on the wall and is attempting to decipher them. He completely tunes out Mimi, Palmon, and Tentomon as he goes to work on this on his laptop, to the mounting frustration of the other three. These next few minutes are basically Mimi just getting more and more pissed off at Izzy ignoring her. Just to sidetrack here for a second, these scenes do an excellent job at highlighting the difference between Japanese sub-Mimi and English dub-Mimi. To some extent, Mimi in the sub was genuinely interested in what Izzy was doing, or at the very least, she understood that what he was doing might be important in them attempting to escape this world. So she's asking Izzy some questions about what he's doing and gets mad because he's completely ignoring her. And in all fairness, Mimi is a 10-year-old girl who has just been separated from the older kids. She needs to be comforted right now, something that Izzy has no understanding of. Unfortunately, in the dub, some of the sympathy we're supposed to be having for Mimi gets sucked out because it seems more like Mimi just wants to leave because she's bored. Now, either way you look at it, Izzy is being a dick in both of these scenes. Or at the very least, he's being insensitive to somebody else because he can't relate to them. But I don't think the intention of this scene was to also make Mimi come across as a spoiled brat, which is what happens in the dub. To some extent, it's a subtle difference between Mimi getting mad because Izzy is being a douche and completely ignoring her, and Mimi getting mad because she isn't getting her way. Finally, Mimi and Palmon start crying, which does get Izzy's attention, but he still has no idea what the hell he did. I've always kind of sort of thought Izzy had Asperger's syndrome, and his exchange with Mimi in this scene as he fails to console her just further makes me think that. Instead of trying to understand Mimi's emotions, he tries to justify his actions logically. This only makes Mimi madder, and she charges right into the depths of the temple. Tentomon follows Mimi, trying to get her to come back before she gets into danger, while Palmon stays behind to scold Izzy. And you'd think it'd be the other way around, but whatever. Mimi blindly runs around inside the temple for a few minutes, crying and screaming about how she wants to go home, before finally collapsing. And yes, in this scene, Mimi references the fact that she's even starting to miss her baby brother. And how much do you want to bet that Mimi doesn't have a little brother and they just made that up for a quick half-second joke? So maybe Mimi's a schizophreniac like John Nash? But at the end of the day, who really cares? So Mimi and Tentomon look up and realize they've gotten lost in a maze. Using his laptop, Izzy manages to find a layout of the maze as well as the location of the two. He also manages to communicate with them and starts guiding them out of the maze. Here we also get a little scene of Tentomon attempting to defend Izzy the best he can. Let me sidetrack for 1 second to just say that Tentomon kicks ass. He's definitely my favorite partner Digimon. And scenes like this do a pretty good job of summing up why. Now, I also like his voice, mannerisms, personality quirks, and character design, but the best thing about Tentomon is the way in which he interacts with Izzy. A lot of the Digimon are just extensions of their human partners. However, Tentomon doesn't get Izzy. He wants to, he tries to, but there's just something there that he can't quite grasp about him. And his interactions with Izzy as he tries to come to terms with this are sometimes very funny and other times very interesting. The only other human Digimon relationship that I can think of that's anywhere close to this is Joe and Gomamon. So the scenes like in this episode where, for instance, Tentomon is trying to get Izzy off his damn computer, or the scene where he's trying to defend Izzy when Mimi's insulting him, are really kind of nice. So while moving about the maze, Mimi and Tentomon run into a Centarumon who's been possessed by a black gear. Unfortunately, there's little Tentomon can do because he can't evolve without Izzy's presence. And there you go. Tentomon following Mimi into the maze was just a plot contrivance. So Izzy leads Mimi into a dead end. Man, I guess he really was sick of her. They're very nearly killed by Centarumon when Izzy manages to break down the wall of the maze so they can get outside. How he managed to punch out the wall with a single rock, I have no idea. Short fight scene, and Centarumon gets the black gear knocked out of him. Centarumon sees the Digivice on Mimi's bag, and we get a little exposition. He says that this temple is, in fact, the temple of the Digivice, and that he is its protector. He calls the Digivice a preserver of the light and a last line of defense against the darkness. Right then, Leomon shows up to fuck some shit up. He beats off Centarumon and turns his attention toward the kids. But they turn their Digivices on him and manage to scare him away. Izzy takes the group back to a giant black gear in the ground that he noticed earlier. He asks Centarumon if he knows how to make it stop, but Centarumon's got no idea. So Izzy plops his butt back down, gets back on his computer, and starts working on deciphering the hieroglyphs again. And this is a deal breaker for me. I was right there on the fence of this episode being good or bad, but I gotta say, this annoys me. Basically, Izzy starts ignoring Mimi again, and Mimi gets bitchy and impetulant again. So neither of them learned anything. In the previous episode, I got the sense that Ty and Matt really learned something about each other and became better people because of it. Here, we get none of that. Did Izzy learn to be more sensitive to Mimi's feelings? No. Did Mimi learn that there are more important things going on here than just what she wants and she should let Izzy take care of his business? No. I was hoping for some character development in this episode, but all we really got were two opposing characters bouncing off each other. Little disappointing, I gotta say. So Mimi gets pissed off, kicks the gear, and this causes it to reverse its motions. The island that they're on starts moving back toward Infinity Mountain. So we do end up getting a peaceful, friendly ending, but only because of a complete accident. Couldn't they have at least thrown in a little line at the end where Izzy apologized for being insensitive and Mimi apologized for being selfish? Just a little something? I guess not. By no means was this episode a total loss. The parts where Izzy interacted with Tentomon and Mimi were very nice, and the exposition was useful. Unfortunately, they blew a perfectly good chance for character development with both Izzy and Mimi. On its own, I might be able to forgive that, but you also have to consider that about half of this episode is Mimi talking. I want to like Mimi, and I think that her character should be, and very easily could be, a likable, sympathetic, and sweet little girl, sort of like Sakura in Card Captors. I would even take Serena from Sailor Moon. But when you turn her dialogue and personality into this, it's just really hard to like her under any circumstance. So I can't give this episode a pass. But in all fairness, let me just say this. I haven't seen episode 11 in a while. I'll be watching it again before I review it. But to my recollection, this episode is certainly much better than that one. But more on that when I get there. Thank you.